This is Capital Games. I am the Wiz. It is Monday, and we're doing another gaming news roundup. This was kind of a light weekend. I covered most of the stuff that happened in the news at the Weekly Dividend on Friday. So this was, again, pretty light, but there's some interesting stories to talk about on here. But first, before I talk about the stories, I want to discuss the game that I've been playing this week. And I'm going to play all week to see how it is and see how my feelings are on the game. Today's game is Arcade Paradise. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube right now, you're probably looking at the gameplay right now and thinking, Wiz, you're effing crazy. I mean, all I'm seeing right now is you picking up trash and putting stuff in a washer machine. What am I watching here? Well, let me tell you what you're watching right now. This is Arcade Paradise. Arcade Paradise is a management sim slash arcade style game, I guess. It's like a cross between Harvest Moon, except you're not farming, you're running a laundromat, and Retro Game Challenge. I don't know if you remember this game, but there's a game for the DS called Retro Game Challenge. And what they did is they had you play old school games that are knockoffs of NES and Master System games, but they overlaid it to a point where you have to make goals in the game to get a new game. And then they put all sorts of different things in the game as well as window dressing. It was actually a really good game. I think that game is still fairly rare right now. It may not be, but if you have a DS and you haven't tried Retro Game Challenge, I would recommend it. It is actually a lot of fun. But anyway, Arcade Paradise. So you're probably watching this, looking at it and going, how is any of this fun? I'm just putting wash into a machine, putting it in a dryer. What's so fun about this? Well, if you're into games like Harvest Moon, you're basically doing a lot of farming and you're tilling your land and you're trying to make crops and everything. There is a satisfaction to the slice of life game. And I think Arcade Paradise is a great example of that. In this, yes, you are running a laundromat where you are putting wash into a machine, you're putting it into a dryer, and then you're making money through that end. But the kick of this game is that everything you do is gamified. So when you put wash into a dryer, you have the whole day in order to put all the stuff in the washer. And then you have to do it fast enough to get a good rating, and then if you do it fast enough, you get more money. And as you're playing the game as well, you're collecting trash. You're looking around the laundromat, you're pressing A to pick up trash, and then if you get enough trash in your bag, you then throw it into the garbage receptacle in the back, and then if you throw it at a good enough rate, you gain more money from doing that. Everything's gamified in this. There are other parts of the game where you are picking up gum, or you're unsticking gum from a seat. If you hit the power bar enough, like you do in a golf game or in a game that requires those kind of levers, you would get more bonuses for doing that. Everything is essentially gamified in this. So why are you doing all this, with the exception of having a prosperous business? Well, the kick is that while you're doing this, you have an arcade in the back of the laundromat, and you want to expand that laundromat to have more games. So what you're also doing while you're waiting for stuff to wash and dry is you're going into the back and playing these old school arcade games. There's one that cross between New Rally X and Grand Theft Auto, which was kind of cool. There's a video air hockey one. There is a match 3 puzzler type game. And all of these games, and this is where it's like Retro Game Challenge, all of these games have goals that you have to meet. And if you meet those goals, that will make those games more popular. And they're more popular, they'll make more money. And as they make more money, you take all the money out of those machines, you put it in the safe, and all the money that you made as well doing the laundromat, you put it in the safe, and then you go online on your computer, and then you order more arcade cabinets. And that's the loop of the game. And I gotta say, everything about this game is incredibly satisfying. When I start a new game, and for recording, I do it for the podcast, I usually play about an hour, maybe a little bit less, just to get some footage to play it, get my feel for the game, and then wonder, okay, how much more I'm going to play this game. I played on Saturday after I did the podcast with Kim. I played this for about an hour and a half, and really had a good time. And then I played it again on Sunday for 2 hours and still having a great time. And then throughout the week, I'm going to play it more. So I'm probably going to put some good time into this game. This game is a lot of fun. And the Another highlight I want to put in is the games are good as well. They're knockoffs of different types of older games, so that's not a surprise. But what I really like is the music in this game. The music when it comes to the games that you're playing are actually really good, like really crunchy, old school music. It is really good. I love the aesthetic of the game. I love everything that you do in this game right now. It is so much fun. So if you are into classic arcade games or classic gaming in general, and you're into things like Harvest Moon or Slice of Life games along those lines, $20 for this game, for right now, I've only played that 3 or 4 hours. For right now, it's well worth it. This is a fun game, and I'm having a blast playing it. And I'm going to talk about it more on Wednesday as the time comes. So if you haven't tried Arcade Paradise, man, do I recommend it so far. It is a lot of fun, but maybe hold off on that purchase until maybe I get more into it, but I will definitely play more as time goes on. Okay, so let's get into the news that happened throughout the weekend and Monday. First up, Spider-Man 2 is not a co-op game, confirms Insomniac. There were some talk that this was possibly going to be a co-op game. I guess the trailers were vague enough where people thought, oh, you get to play as Spider-Man and Miles Morales, da-da-da. And on the one hand, I can look at this and go, oh, that was obvious it was not going to happen. This is such a massive game. How can you do that? But I know on the other hand how you can get into hype. And if you're excited for this game, you want to be surprised by what a company like Insomniac can do with their games. I can understand being excited by that, so I can't get too down on that. But yeah, it's not a surprise that it's co-op. I think the big surprise of this will be that you're going to play as Venom at some point in the game. I think that might be the big thing with that. I might be wrong, but we'll see on that one. So yeah, not a co-op game, which is fine. I think a lot of people are still looking forward to that game, and we'll see how that does. It'll probably be announced at the PlayStation Showcase that happens this week. That's Wednesday, I think, right? So we'll know more when that happens. Next up, the Ubisoft Star Wars game that is planned for a March 2024 release. With that said, when they kind of talked about it, they're saying that's very optimistic, so it might be more 2025. The game is developed by Ubisoft Massive, who created The Division. This was announced around January 2021. And is rumored to be formally announced at the Ubisoft Forward event coming in June 12th. So we don't know much about it, but the guess I'm gonna have is, since it's from the Division team, would it be a shock if this was a lot like the Division, where you play as a rogue trader, or like a Han Solo type, or maybe even a soldier type that uses blaster guns? I wouldn't be that surprised, but we'll see. I don't know exactly what this might be, so we'll find out more when that happens. But that is looking for minimum a March 2024 release. With the way Ubisoft is right now, I'm gonna bet it's probably gonna be 2025. Hold your phone on that before you get too excited. 3 or 4 big announcements planned for the Summer Games Fest, says Jeff Keighley. Okay, look, I like Jeff Keighley. It's kind of hard not to, really, but the man's advertising his stream. Let's be honest. I mean, if Day 9 came out there and said, hey guys, guess what? There's going to be much less cringe in the PC gaming show, so, look forward to it. What exactly is much less? Are we talking about 20%, 40%? Which is what I'm saying with this one as well. What is big announcements, really? Is big announcements, I don't know, something that is from a franchise that we already know about? Are they going to announce the next thing for Destiny? That's technically a big announcement. Or is it a completely new property? Might be, but we don't know. Big announcement is very vague in this. And we might have something interesting that happens in that stream. But to dive into the hype, really, when it's really Keighley's job to just start it up, I'll hear it. Oh, that's nice. We'll see. And we'll see what that happens. Next up, AEW Fight Forever will release on June 29th. This game was announced in 2020, and it has been delayed constantly at this point. They've shown gameplay off. They went for a feel of No Mercy back in the N64 days, which a lot of people were nostalgic for with those wrestling games. And it seems to hit that note, but they also added mini games and all sorts of extra stuff in this, so I'm not sure where this game is going to go here, because if they went for a kitchen sink approach, there is the possibility that the gameplay itself might not be as robust as people really want when they come to their wrestling games. But if it's really a nostalgia piece and they're trying to go back to the Aki engine with No Mercy and WrestleMania 2000, and that's what they were going for, then sure, that could work. But we'll see what that comes down to in this one. I guess the only other question is CM Punk going to be in this? And is there going to be a mode where he completely destroys the AEW to see if you can repair it back to him being back on it again? So we'll see about that. That's for you wrestling fans out there, if you are. So if you didn't get it, that's fine. No big deal. And the last story, EA Sports has huge confidence in its non-FIFA branded soccer game that's coming out this year. That's EAFC. I mean, I don't see why they don't have confidence. They're getting a bunch of the players and the teams on there from all the different leagues. I can see why they have a lot of confidence in that game. But like me and Zero talked about in the past, I don't see this selling as well. There's going to be some people who are going to look for a FIFA, and it's not going to be there, and you're going to have somebody to point out, actually, that's EAFC now, so you might want to, There are going to be stragglers who are going to look for that FIFA game, and they're not going to ask somebody, and they're like, oh, I guess there's no more FIFA. Oh, well, that's bound to happen, I think. I don't think the sales will drop really bad. I think it will drop a little. And like I've said, I think in a couple of years, it will go back to normal at that end. But at this point, I'm expecting a sales drop. I don't think it's going to be really big, but it is going to be sizable to a certain extent. Maybe like 3 or 4% dip on that, I would say. Maybe a little more. So but then again, me pontificating on sales has not been hot, so it might be bigger. But I think the sales will go down when it changes over to EAFC. But we'll see how it turns out. All right, now on the final note, I didn't have a big story or a top story this week, so I'm going to start a little thing that I'm going to call the Wiz Says. And that's me talking about a different topic on these gaming roundups. So for today's The Wiz Says, my topic is gaming might be a dominant moneymaker in the entertainment industry, but it's sorely lacking in the cultural side of entertainment. I hear all the time from people who are big gamers, and let me just say this: I love gaming too. I love gaming, but when I hear someone saying video games are the most dominant entertainment in the world, and every time they say this, they cite sales. They cite the amount of money it makes. And no one really pushes back on this. They say, oh yeah, it makes so much money. Of course it is. But I'm going to, and here's why. There is a reason why the sales for video games are so huge. Part of it is its popularity. Sure, it is a popular form of entertainment, but it also requires you to spend a lot of money to interface with it. You have to buy the $500 console. You have to have the $70 controller. You have to buy $70 for the game. That has microtransactions on top of it. Whereas movies, you can either get a streaming service for $10 a month, or you can buy the disc for $30, or you can buy it digitally for $20 or rent it for $6. The money that you can get from movies is much less than it is for games on this one. So that's one thing that I have to point out every time someone says, oh, look at the money it makes. Yeah, there's a reason why, because you have to spend more money to play the games. So with that said, and I get that. I mean, a lot of people are buying these games and all these units. I get that. But on the cultural side, gaming is not that popular. It has a niche to it, sure, and that's a sizable niche. But does it really drive the cultural aspects of life right now? No, it does not. Let me show you something here. This is a tweet from somebody on Twitter that tweeted this out a couple of weeks ago when The Legend of Zelda was about to release, but there was a midnight release launch at a GameStop. And this is what this person tweeted with a video of a line of people going in to buy Tears of the Kingdom. I am shocked. This is the line of a GameStop. So many people waiting for a video game. They could do so much more, like gym, working on business, reading. Instead, they waste their life. Now, she would go on to say that she doesn't mind people who play video games. They would rather have them play games after accomplish something. Yeah, you have no problem with games, huh? Sure, pal. The problem is waiting in line for hours for a video game that you could have bought online or later, which, okay, sure, yeah. Me, I tend to buy digitally now. unless I wait for a sale, then I'll buy it physically. That aspect I kind of understand. Like, the midnight launch thing is more of a nostalgic thing for people now, I think. It's more older people who are doing that because they remember and miss the times where they got Halo 2 at launch. That's one I remember specifically. I get that to a certain extent, but the fact that this person says, I have no problem with people who play games, yeah, okay, bullshit. So why am I mentioning that when I'm also saying that this person obviously has a problem with gamers? Because this isn't abnormal. I have to remind people of is, can you go to any business that you work in or any job that you have or any place, go up to a stranger and go, hey bro, so what do you think of Tears of the Kingdom? No, you can't. And the older you are, you can't do that. Why? Because not everyone plays games. Not everyone plays video games. And yes, not everyone watches movies or watches TV, but there is much more people who do that than play video games. Another example, how many people have you talked to who says, oh, all weekend, I just binge-watched Stranger Things. I just watched all 10 hours of it this weekend. And no one bats a fucking eyelash. But if you say that you played a game for like 4 hours over the weekend, they look at you like you have 3 heads. Is it wrong? Yes, it's wrong. It's fucked up. But that's the way it is still. There is still a stigma involved in playing video games, especially as you get older. Let me give you a little bit of context with why I feel this way. I worked at a bank, okay? I was a banker. I worked from teller to then become a personal banker, and then I became a manager. When I was a personal banker and when I was a manager, I would always get weird looks because I would bring my Vita, or I'd bring my 3DS, or I'd bring my Switch, or I'd bring my DS, or my PSP to work to play on my break. I would nibble on something and I would play something on one of those systems. And I'd always get weird looks. Why is that? Because the thing with video games is that adults, to this day, even though there's more adults who play video games, but to this day, an adult who takes himself, quote-unquote, or herself, quote-unquote, seriously, looks at somebody with video games and goes, haven't you grown out of that? Maybe you should put it away. Why don't you go to the bar? Why don't you, you can tell them you're a fucking asshole, shut the fuck up, but there are going to be more people who are going to agree with that person than are going to agree with me. That is just the way it is. Now, of course, when I became their boss, they shut the fuck up. But, But anyway, yeah, that is not normal. And I hate to say this to you guys, because I know you guys are really into video games. And I am too. I love playing video games. If I go to somebody and say, hey, did you watch the last Succession episode last night? I'm going to more likely get a conversation. And even if they didn't see the episode, they'll be like, oh no, I don't watch that. I've heard it's good though. It's like, yeah, it is. Or like Game of Thrones. Same thing. You would hear until you blew in the face how great Game of Thrones is. But if I go in there and say, hey man, I've been playing this game called Arcade Paradise. It's great. It's like, oh yeah, okay, loser. What the hell? Are you still a virgin? What the hell? I don't want to hear you, fucking loser. I'm exaggerating, of course. But that stigma is still there. Why is it still there? I think for 2 reasons. One, games are afraid to grow up. When you look at movies, let's start at the beginning with movies. And I'm talking like 1890s, 1900s, 1910s, okay? With movies, the tech had to evolve in a lot slower pace. And then probably around the 1900s, 1910s is when they started making feature films. But they weren't talkies, they were silent. And they had to be placards and there's a little music behind. So the stories had to be very rudimentary and probably not as in-depth. Is when the talkies came in around the 20s and 30s is when movies started to evolve. And then it started evolving from black and white to color and everything. Same thing with games. Games went from being basic from the 70s on Atari to what it is nowadays. But the evolution of what happened with games was much faster technically. Now, because of how slow the movie industry had to evolve, it couldn't wow people right away in a 5-10 year clip, so you had to provide more stories and more interesting things that artists could do. That is why movies tend to be a much more dominant feature when it comes to the culture in that aspect, because they have the amount of time that they needed to cultivate that artistic integrity and the artistry that they would have to give good stories that were crowd-pleasing. Not so with games. Games have evolved so fast technically at this point that there is more money and more effort going into the technical side of stuff, the way the game plays, looks, the sounds, and everything, than the gameplay itself. A lot of the games that you are playing now, the popular games, are really just throwbacks of, or just evolutions of when it all started back in the 70s and 80s. Then because of that, gaming hasn't really evolved creatively as much as it used to. And then the other thing that is the problem with games as well is the nomenclature behind games. What do? You play games. So it's not that you're experiencing a narrative through a creative lens, or experiencing a narrative through a lens of which you create the story. No, you're playing a game. So when people look at this, I play video games, what they're thinking is, oh, you play with toys. You're an adult who plays with toys. That's what you do. And yes, they would be wrong to think that, but unfortunately, the vast majority of people who do not play games do act that way. They look at you like you are some sort of weirdo. That has to change as well, and I think that has to change in a number of ways. I think, one, we need to find a better name for video games. Just for that aspect, to just let people understand that games have evolved into something entirely different, which I believe to a certain extent they have. Number two, I mean, at this point, the other problem is that the business is run by the money men. In the movie industry, there are money men in there that run what gets made, but the artists really control what exactly gets made and what exactly gets popular. That's not so with video games. It's the money men who do that. And maybe every once in a while you'll get a game that blows people away that was made cheaply, but really did something different on the gaming side. But that rarely happens nowadays. So you're stuck with this problem where if you want to get a big game and you need the money to do something different, you need to convince a bunch of suits to say, okay, well, how much money is this going to make us? What's the profit margin? What's this? What's that? Is this going to be an IP that we can mine for 10, 20, 30 years? And when people ask that, they don't ask for something different, they ask for something safe. And I think that's the main issue that's come across with the game industry. It's very safe in that, and it is not going to evolve until artists start taking control and start showing that they have more power in this dynamic than the money men think that they do. But right now, a lot of artists are afraid to piss off those people because they own the purse strings, they own the IPs, and without them, they really can't do anything. So I think at this point, my thoughts on this are pretty clear. I love video games. I've always loved video games. I will continue to love video games. But I'm not going to lie and say that they're a better artistic expression than movies or TV. They're just not. And at this point, it's kind of disappointing. When I wanted to, in like the year 2000, 2001, I went from wanting to just talk about movies and talk about film and the artistry and the brilliance of it, to then saying, I really need to pay attention to games because something's happening here that is going to be really different and unique and special in like 10 years. And it never happened. It just never happened. Yes, more people started playing it. More adults started playing it. When it comes to artistic achievement and telling stories that can't be told in other mediums, games just ape movies at this point. It's really the thing that they do the most. When you play a game, could that be made into a movie? Yes, more than likely. God of War, yes. The Division, yes. Think of all the popular games that are out there, especially the more cinematic focused ones. They can all be movies. So all you're doing is playing a movie at that point. On that note as well, the other question that I get from people who criticize me or really wonder why I'm playing video games even though I'm a diehard movie fan is, has a game ever made you cry? Have you ever gotten an emotional reaction from a game? And most of you will say yes. I have too. But if I'm being honest, the last game that I got any emotional reaction to was Gone Home, which is nearing 10 years ago. I thought after Gone Home, we would be getting more dynamic and interesting stories. We just haven't. There are a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, it's been pretty samey. I love video games, and when it comes to the amount of money they make oodles of money. But I can't have an hour and a half dissertation or conversation with somebody about the themes and the character development of most games, because they're all very threadbare. Because the main point that they want is, and what gamers ask for is, I want to have fun. I had a conversation with Zero sometime about games that will challenge people's perceptions, or that might disturb or make them uncomfortable. And the example I gave was, would you play Schindler's List, the game? And he said, no one would want that. Absolutely. But if I turned around and said, this is a management sim where you have to hire people to keep them safe from an ongoing war that's happening. And as you're doing that, they're building cars, they're building stuff. So you're making profits to keep the place running and to hire more people to save their lives. In that instance, he was like, oh, that sounds interesting. But once I said, Schindler's List, the game, he said, no, that would never happen. That'd be terrible. They're the same game. But the moment that you say, I want to challenge people's perceptions, or I want to make it art, all of a sudden there's this terrible feeling from gamers like, I don't want my games to be art. I just want them to have fun. I just want to have fun. That's all I want. Well, guys, you can't have it both ways. You can't be the dominant entertainment that is culturally significant and just say, I just want to press the button to make things blow up. You can't do that. All right, well, some of you would say, well, Wiz, Star Wars, Fast and the Furious. I mean, come on, man. Like, these are all fun movies. They don't say anything artistically significant. Sure, you're absolutely right. But I don't get laughed at when I say films are art. They may argue with me. But when I mention, what about Schindler's List? What about this? What about... Oh, yeah. I guess I see what you're saying. If I say video games are art, they're gonna laugh. They're gonna make fun of me, and they're going to look at me like I have 3 fucking heads. That is the main problem. So yes, games, when it comes to the amount of money they make, are, bar none, better than any entertainment industry. But that does not mean they are culturally relevant or important to the culture that surrounds us. It just isn't. Gaming is in its own fiefdom, but at no point do they really shape the culture that is around us at this point. And for many reasons. Many because the money men are the ones that run it, and the gamers that play them don't want them to say anything, because they don't want to feel bad while they play their games. That is why when people say, or gamers specifically say, we're the dominant entertainment of the country. You're not. You just make the most money. And there is a distinct difference. All right, guys. Well, that is it for this episode of Capital Games for the Gaming News Roundup. Wednesday, I'll have another Gaming News Roundup, and we'll talk about the game of the week that's happening. And I believe that's going to be Lord of the Rings Gollum. I think the review embargo will be up by then. The PlayStation Showcase is also this week, and I will more than likely be covering that on a separate video, so look forward to that. So until next time, I am the Wiz. This is Capital Games. Talk to you next time. Bye. Thank you for checking out Capital Games, where we cover the business side of the video game industry. Please like, subscribe, and comment if you enjoyed the video. You can also subscribe to the podcast if you prefer to have it on your podcast feed. And check us out on our socials and email us if you have a question, comment, or suggestion. Thank you for watching and listening. We'll hear from you next time.